Hi, welcome back to another video for the series. Today we're going to cover high availability and scalability in the cloud. There's a couple things we're going to cover, mostly just high availability and scalability in the private cloud environment over anything else. Now, now as far as particularly what we're going to cover is just going to be scalability and availability concepts. And they always refer to always ensure that the infrastructure can justify and satisfy the demand and utilization needed by end users, right? So this is a key focus area when planning an infrastructure is not um, performing this thoroughly can result in full denial of service to end users. Now, high availability, what it is, Fabric is loading here, it's a prime motive to migrate to a cloud environment or infrastructure and ensures redundancy. And constant monitoring and failovers are in place to prevent denial of service. Now, public clouds, make sure everything's working. Now, public clouds also implement availability zones, which I mentioned in another video I briefly touched on. And I'll actually get into that in another video more particularly when I get more into my AWS, maybe a little bit in the Azure, but mostly in the AWS videos I'm going to cover. It's pretty much isolated, fault tolerant, and highly unlikely to fail. Simultaneously, it can be a great tool when ensuring the high availability. Also, effectively scaling an infrastructure right in the cloud environment comes in different forms and ultimately depends on the specific scenario for what needs to be scaled and will vary depending on the circumstances. Now, the options for scaling is, you could do auto scaling, vertical, horizontal, cloud bursting. It's a couple of different options you have. Now, it is key to consider different applications as far as virtual machines, containers, which are packages like software and code and configurations in a single location, clusters, you have other types of resources as well. Actually, while I'm covering this, let me make sure everything is working properly because I'm sure what's going on here. But, it's key to consider different options, like applications as far as virtual machines, again, containers, clusters, and other type of resources. When considering scaling options, right? So it's specifically recommended that these are configured to auto scaling when they need to. Now, what I'm going to do first here is go over private cloud scalability and availability options. So many hypervisors, they allow both manual and dynamic scaling of virtual machines in a multitude of ways. And this provided that the host has the partition or capacity to enable these changes. Now, this is definitely invaluable in a private cloud environment or infrastructure. Will likely need to be amended to ensure integrity and high availability. So what I'm going to do is explore some scalability controls using Hyper-V. If this ever loads for me, it looks like my latency is not looking great here. Where we're in, and I'm going through the Hyper-V manager by way of the server manager, right? So let's actually here. All right. Looks like it should be actually it should be here that it's not there. Okay. This should be a virtual machine is what I'm looking for it to be preloaded in a Hyper-V manager. Um, there it is. Practice lab. Okay, take a look at the settings. Now I'm doing this to open configuration settings for the Win 101. Wish I could maximize this, but nonetheless, this is fine. Unfortunately, now I'm going to take a look at the hardware first. Now with the memory, it looks like there is 512 megabytes of random access memory, which I can increase to improve the performance of this device. And I can, increase it by specifying a new amount, but I'm going to leave it as 512. That's fine. Again, this is, just showcasing what the configuration possibilities, right? But I am going to take a look at the enabling the dynamic memory. right? Now, this is going to enable this option, right? Meaning that this device will dynamically scale depending on the system resource utilization by the host machine, right? So in a real world scenario, this is like a good auto scaling option, right? To use in anti-affinity models, like as the risk of hitting host capacity is less, being that there is only one device. So using this option, I could either leave the maximum RAM right here up to the to the default that we have in 104.85.76, which is pretty much 1,048 gigabytes. Um, Effectively meaning that it will scale upwards until it hits the max capacity of the host device, or instead manually specify a maximum upper limit. So this option can actually be helpful if I have multiple devices working together on a single machine and affinity configuration, although this should be carefully planned to avoid the host becoming a SPOF, which is the maximum amount supported by Hyper-V, which is pretty much 1 terabyte. So I'm going to leave the maximum around. There's quite a bit of RAM, so I'm just going to change it to 2048. And I can also specify the weight priority for this device to have access to memory using the memory weight setting here. So I'm going to actually place it to high, and then going to make sure it's applied. All right. So let's take a look at now this applied. I'm going to take a look at the processor. Now I can specify the number of virtual processors here that the VM has access to. Now this can be helpful to increase devices that have a higher amount of CPU utilization. And again, it's limited by the number of processors available on the host machine. For example, if a machine was going to be used for specifically high CPU intensive tasks, right, then it would be prudent to ensure, that it has access to more CPU power than other machines. Then the maximum limit supported by Hyper-V would be 240 vCPUs, I believe. But I'm going to change this to 3, right, for the value. Now, once I make this change, not sure if you noticed, but if you take a look here and you take a look here, when I make the change, you should notice that the percentages below here change depending on the load. So this is going to apply to the host and other virtual machines running concurrently. So with 3 vCPUs, that the percent of the total system resources has increased to 75%. Now with 4 or more, naturally it would increase to 100% or higher. So I'm going to hit apply here. Now, let's take a look here. Now let's take a look at checkpoints. Now, to ensure high availability and minimal downtime, right? That's because one of the major things, right, when it comes to any aspect of IT, we want to make sure that the business, no matter what happens to it, especially for what my scope is going to be, security as far as IT is concerned, we want to make sure that the business, no matter what happens, is not affected as far as its actual product, as far as anything that it has to do to generate any revenue. We want to make sure that's not, there is absolutely no downtime, but to minimize it, mitigate it as much as humanly possible, right? So now to ensure this, right, as part of an infrastructure in Hyper-V, right, it's imperative that the checkpoints are created frequently to allow easy recovery and failover if any single device fails, right? So this can be helpful in development environments as code deployments can sometimes have negative effects on machines and may require frequent rollback. So I'm just going to use automatic checkpoint, right? Now, what this does is it's going to automate pretty much what it sounds like, automated the processing, creating checkpoints automatically. So this can be helpful, although it does remove some direct control if relied on 100% of the time. But it is key to, you want to make sure to, as well as having the automatic checkpointing, that manual reviews take place and more checkpoints are done as necessary. So I'm just going to hit apply and then click OK. So then now we're out. So I'm just going to actually close this window and the server manager window. And that also brings us to the end of the video. So now just for a brief recap, we pretty much overall, we went over high availability and scalability in the cloud, specifically with Hyper-V, the Hyper-V manager. And just for a brief recap, as far as exercises that we covered, we defined and described the importance of high availability and scalability in the cloud environment. And we investigated and analyzed some scalability options in a private cloud environment as well. This was most certainly fun. It was fairly quick, still fun. I can't wait to do the next one where we go over analyzing business requirements for a cloud solution. Can't wait to see you there. Until then, stay curious, stay secure.